Hi guys, Blacksmith MMA here. I haven't done a video for a while because quite frankly the last few weeks I've not had the best read on the last few cards. There's been fighters who I haven't watched for as long compared to a card like with UFC 300 where pretty much every fighter on this card I've been watching their entire career almost. So I wanted to wait. I only really do videos when it's something that I really have a clear opinion on, or it's something that I feel like I can impart knowledge. And it shows actually, because the last 2 weeks, after having, I think 5 weeks where we absolutely killed the UFC, I had a 32 unit win, 20 unit win, a 20 unit win, and then a couple that were just sub 10 unit profits. And then I had 2 weeks, and I have been saying this all along, sports betting, you can't win forever. Variance will catch up with you. My ROI at one point was 45% for the UFC, which is because I only started tracking my VIP about a month or two ago, so I've got a very small pool of data. So that number I've always said was inflated and it would come back down, and it has come crashing down the last 2 weeks. I've made some bad reads and also got very, very unlucky as well. I think a lot of people have been in the same boat, but part of it as well I think has been just not fading fights when I should do, and just wanting to play fights every weekend. So I'm going to start to be more conservative with my plays and just focus on cards like this weekend at UFC 300 where I've got a very good read. And that's a lesson for anyone who wants to be a professional sports bettor. Knowing when not to bet is the hardest thing to do, because often we do have reads and we feel like we've got a good understanding, but it's not a big enough edge to place the bet. And that's probably the biggest mistake people make earlier in their career, and it's one that I'm just starting to figure out. But UFC 300, I feel like I've got quite a good read on all of these fights, at least most of them. Some of my opinions, and this is the tough thing with capping MMA, because we do our analysis and we make a case for both sides, but then we have to play the odds. So sometimes we play a fighter even though we think they're going to lose because the odds are so good. So I'll explain both. I'll explain who I think is going to win, but also where the value is as well for the entire card. So it starts off with Figgy fighting Garbrandt. Davidson Figuereido, former champion. He looked so good when he was champ. And people were saying, well, he's going to be there for a very long time. He's got such a good skill set. He's so powerful for the weight class. Same thing with Cody. Very fast hands, very good boxing, very sharp. But Cody, in my opinion, had a style that you could see him getting surpassed by other fighters, because he is a striker, and not just a striker, he's mainly a boxer. The boxing is really what he uses. Yeah, he can throw kicks in, he can mix in, elbows, and he's not just a completely one-dimensional boxer, but that is where he shines against other fighters. Figgy as well, more of a kickboxer in terms of his striking style, but his hands are probably his biggest weapon. But I would say he's got the more rounded skill set. He can wrestle, he's also got some very good jiu-jitsu, and I would say he's the most athletic, even though Cody has got very elite hand speed. The odds for this, Figgy at the moment is 1.30 odds. Cody is 3.50. So I think in American odds, that's like plus 250. It's quite big odds, but I would say it's justified. If we've looked at their most recent performances, obviously Figgy has been at this pinnacle where he was performing very well, and then he's fallen off a bit. Cody the same thing, but Cody's has been more drastic. And he's also had a few situations where, not just where he's been dropped, but I mean where he's been clipped and he looks kind of unsteady on his feet. To me, he looks like he's got a lot of miles on his body and it's catching up to him. Figgy, I feel like, isn't in the same boat. So I think those odds are quite accurate. I really wouldn't say, I don't personally think there's value in either side. I think Cody actually is probably going to decline and continue to look worse in his career. I think Figgy will as well, but I think it's a much more gradual decline. So I think Figgy is at a point where he's trying to find himself, and he may be one of those fighters, we've seen this happen a lot of times, he may be one of these fighters who reinvents themselves and comes back better. I can't really see it, but he's got the skill set and the athleticism and the physical attributes to do that. Cody, I feel like time's passed him by and he's on borrowed time. So, got to go with Figgy if you're going to play this one. I don't like the odds. Maybe Figgy to win by knockout. I think when I looked at the odds, it was something like, it wasn't far over even money. which isn't great, to be perfectly honest. I could see this being a 3-round fight with someone like Cody. I can see him getting bashed up a bit, but surviving to a decision. But if I was going to play a prop, I would play Figgy by KO. He may even be able to get a club and sub as well. So I think he's just levels above Cody. Moving on. This fight is amazing, and the UFC have done something with it as well. So this is Green. So Green versus Miller. Bobby Green, Jim Miller, 2 fan favourites, 2 vets. Interesting, because if you look at the previous fight, we've got 2 former champions, and I think Lucrative MMA pointed out, I don't think we've ever had a card start with 2 former champs, maybe not even a former champ being the first fight on a card. So this is kind of like a statement by the UFC, saying they are pulling out all the stops. They want to make this card a banger from start to finish. They've increased the performance bonuses to 300k, begrudgingly, because Dana did get finessed really live by all the fighters at the press conference. But you've got to believe that means something. Some of these fighters, like Cody Garbrandt, for example, he may not have many fights left in it, but he may know that he's on the decline and he needs to bank some money. So fighters like him will be, and trust, I know some of you think these guys earn a lot of money. After training and everything else, it's not as much as you think. Especially if they're looking to retire, they need to bank money and save it. So some of them don't do that. They spend money on jewellery and diamonds and all kinds of crazy stuff, and then they get to the latest stage of their career and they think, oh no, I need to start making some money now, which is what I think's happened with Bobby Green, because I could be speculating here, but to me, he seems like he takes fights without really thinking about it. He was knocked out very, very badly in his last fight. Ref made a big mistake, he really dropped the ball, he took way too much punishment, but before that his chin has looked bad. And I feel like Bobby Green, he takes fights that he shouldn't take because he wants the money. And he said before, I've seen him in interviews, on podcasts, said, look, I'm all about that money, I just want to stack the paper. Well, okay, but there's a risk reward. You look at Max Holloway, he's someone who's very careful with his health. He takes himself very seriously in that regard. His body is his investment. He wants to have a long career, and he's had a long career. He's been fighting for a long time, and his chin has held up very well. On the flip side, we've got Green, who is starting to get dropped, he's starting to get KO'd. He had a very bad KO, he suffered very bad damage in that fight, and his chin was already looking bad. So he's back too soon in my opinion, just like how I predicted Volk to get knocked out because he was coming back too early after a knockout loss. I think it's the same thing, and I think Green kind of knows it's a risk, but he just doesn't care. He wants to get the money. He's fighting Miller. Miller is one of these fighters who, you know, on the flip side, he's a vet, but he's looked phenomenal in terms of his chin. I think it was, I don't even know how long it was, I think it's over 10 years since he's been stopped by strikes. So he's got a big head, great chin, and I think he looks after himself. He's someone who was a professional and takes this sport very seriously, and he does everything the right way. So he's had very good longevity. He obviously is not going to be improving physically. He'll be in decline physically at his age, but his skill set is getting good, and he's adapting his style well to work around it. Most fighters, what they do when they get older and they start losing their edge physically, they try and fight like they did when they were younger, when they had the speed advantage or whatever the advantage might be. Jim Miller's actually adapted his style quite well. I think if we went back a few years ago when they were previously due to fight, I think I would have to say that Green has an advantage. I think his striking style would work very well against Jim Miller, but now they're at this point in their career, things have evened up. Miller is the shorter fighter, but their reach is about the same. He's got very long arms. Obviously, Green still has a reach advantage when it comes to kicking, but I don't think he's really going to use the kicks much. He's known for more using his boxing. I think Miller will actually kick Green's legs a lot. I think Miller will also try and wrestle him, I think just to slow him down a little bit. And this is what happens to Green sometimes. Sometimes Green looks incredible to begin with, and you think, wow, this guy's looking fantastic. A few fights ago, I can't remember who he was fighting, but people were talking like he was going to have a resurgence because he really did look slick. But it depends who you're fighting. And as time's gone on, his chin degrading, now going against someone who's got a very solid chin in Miller, I think that's just a bad recipe, because I think Miller can actually eat one to give one in this situation. I think if he eats a punch and he lands one on Green, I think Green's going to get rocked and go down. And Miller also, he was at UFC 100, UFC 200, won both of those fights. It would be fitting for him to get a win at UFC 300. Not saying that's why they booked the fight or anything else, but the story kind of makes sense. I think Green hasn't got much more longevity in his career, and I kind of feel like he's being used as a bit of a sacrifice to Miller, so Miller can go on and have a few more fights and be that typical UFC veteran that does a few cards and gets wheeled out, you know, for them to talk about the history of the UFC. I don't think Green can really do that because he's so chinny. I think he's a bit of a liability in that role. So we've seen this with the UFC. They like to take fighters who are on their way out, give them a few fights, let them get banged up, and then move on. Unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen to Green. He has the tools to win this fight. He has the tools to win and to either outpoint Miller, I think over a round and a half, and then it will flip. And I would say knock him out, but Miller's not been dropped in so long, so I don't know. But I'd like to think Green does have the ability to drop most fighters in his division, but he just has not got he's not got the attributes anymore to land those strikes as crisp and cleanly. So I just don't see him getting Miller. I think Miller at 2.50 odds, you know, plus 150, I think that works out to be. I think that's a gift from the gods, to be honest, and I'd be all over that. Next we've got Jessica Andrade, and she's fighting Rodriguez. And Rodriguez is a fighter who everyone seems to be on this week, and I'm just not seeing it. Rodriguez is a great striker, don't get me wrong. She actually is someone who's quite interesting to watch in terms of like the striking in women's MMA. She's one of the more interesting strikers. But she has had problems with women who punch hard before. We saw this with Lopes. And I can't remember, there was another fight I watched where it seemed like she got a bit of deer in the headlights sort of reaction when she started getting bombed on. Andrade has that sort of power. Big, powerful hooks. She's also got the advantage when it comes to the grappling. So we don't do MMA math here. That's when you say, oh, this fighter's gonna beat her because she beat the fighter that beat her. But Andrade submitted Lopes with a standing arm triangle. Lopes was a problem for Rodriguez on the ground. I think Andrade doesn't have the frame. She's the complete opposite. She's a much shorter, stockier fighter. Lopes' frame does give people problems, but I think that just shows that Andrade is very crafty when it comes to the submission game. She's also quite explosive, so she can get the fight to the ground as well, which is the problem a lot of women have in women's MMA. The ones who've got good jiu-jitsu struggle to get the fight to the ground. Andrade has got that. So if Andrade grapples, this will be a very, very bad night for Rodriguez. If she has a bit of ego about her and tries to actually strike, it's going to be more even, but I think it's the power that's going to be the equaliser. I just think there's more ways for Andrade to win this fight. I think she can win by submission or by TKO, or she could win a points decision by mixing the two together. Mixing the power strikes, getting the takedowns, not letting herself be outpointed by Rodriguez. So this is going to be an interesting fight. If I was going to pick a side, I would pick Andrade. I think at the moment she's at 1.72 odds. The odds were a lot better, I think, when they originally released, and then they kind of went up and down a little bit. But where they're at the moment, I think is pretty fair value. If they go down a bit lower, I probably wouldn't play it personally. But I do not see Rodriguez winning. That's just my opinion. Obviously, this doesn't mean it can't happen. She's got the tools to win a striking battle by points, I believe. That's her path to victory. So if I was going to play Rodriguez, I would play her to win by decision, and Andrade to win by finish. I could also see it on points, but I think Andrade is going to make a statement here, and she's going to have a very good win. She also, when she's had a loss in one of her last fights, if she has a losing fight, she comes back better, and her last few performances, it looks like she really has been skilling up as well. So she's still learning and improving. So I really like that about Andrade. Next fight, we've got Yussuf versus Lopes. I absolutely love Lopes at the moment. People in my Telegram will know that I'm very high on him. He's just got a very nice skill set. He's got this big frame as well. He's also got this very calm body language when he fights, and you can see it in his cardio. He's got very good cardio. He also has got very good awareness. Because of that calm demeanour, he seems to have very good situational awareness and good fight IQ. This is going to be a testing fight for him. It is a step up in competition. Yussuf is no joke. And Yussuf is very good on the ground as well. But I think Lopes is going to have a big advantage with the striking. I think his frame for the division is huge as well. He's a very big guy, a very big tall guy, and he's actually, for his frame, he's actually got some decent stockiness to him. So he's actually a very large fighter for the weight class. So I think that may give him advantage to avoid the grappling scenarios and just break contact. Or he may go down and land some ground and pound and then stand up. I don't really know where he's going to take the fight, but I just can see him finish it. I can kind of see him getting a club and sub. I think he could drop Yussuf and then get him, I don't know, by arm triangle, something like that on the ground. Yussuf is an amazing grappler, but we see this all the time when jiu-jitsu experts get clipped and they get submitted, and I can see something like that happening. Or I can see maybe like a standing TKO or something where Yussuf is really trying to trade with Lopes and Lopes is just that bit more powerful and just ends up swarming him. So I'm going to say Lopes. I think it's going to be a very good fight, quite a close fight. The odds at the moment are 1.66 for Lopes and 2.25 for Yussuf. So there's not much value left on Lopes right now, but it's at a point where I'd say it's playable but risky. I think the value is starting to shift towards Yussuf, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. This is going to be a very good fight. Next, we've got Holm fighting Harrison. So Holm, she's been doing this for ages. Like when I was watching the UFC, I mean, I started watching the UFC back when some of these fighters were first starting their career. But Holm had already been fighting for quite a while. I remember when she came into the UFC and there was a lot of hype about her, and with Ronda Rousey. I don't want to say I predicted how she would beat Rousey, but I've been saying for a long time, just bet on Ronda. She's such a huge favourite. The odds are so good for her opponents. She's going to lose eventually because she has a gap in the skill, and Holm head kick knocked her out. It wasn't really a prediction because I said that in the fight previous. I can't remember who Ronda was fighting now. But I'm saying this because I think very highly of Holm. I think she's got a very good skill set. She's a very, very good striker, very good athlete, very big for the weight class as well. But that was a very long time ago. If I think back, I don't know how many years ago that was, many years ago now, like not quite 10 years, but not far off. I think one thing Holm often has is she's got a frame and size advantage, a bit like how we saw in the most recent fight with Blanchfield and Figuereido. Figuereido had a big frame advantage as well as her skill, but the frame and size allowed her to defend the takedowns very effectively. Holm may be the smaller fighter here. Harrison's a big, big girl for the weight class. She's going to be stronger, larger. I think she's going to take Holm down. We've not really seen Holm be taken down before, so this should be quite interesting. I can see a scenario where Holm defends the takedowns and actually starts having some success on the feet, but I think eventually the takedown is going to come. I think Harrison at 1.22 odds is very poor value. I wouldn't bet Holm. I think if someone's going to play this fight, it would be Harrison by finish, because I don't know what the odds are, but I think they're quite good just because Holm is such a veteran. I think a lot of people don't really expect her to be finished, but I can see that happening now just because I think just because of the age of Holm and she's getting on in her career, and this is one time where she's not going to have a size advantage. So I think that's actually going to make things look very different compared to most of her fights, where she's got a lot of advantages when it comes to her athleticism and also her frame as well. So I would play Harrison by finish if I was going to play this fight. I can see a world where Holm has more success than most people think, but I'm not touching that. I think that's a risky play. However, over the last few weeks, we've seen some weird decisions with women's MMA where grappling and striking have been scored. Sometimes the grappling gets scored, sometimes the striking does. So there is an argument to say at 4.50 odds plus 350, Holm may not be a really bad underdog to pick. She could win some sort of robbery decision, or even just fight smartly, land some strikes, and stall. And maybe Harrison does get a takedown, but maybe she's up against the cage grappling and it takes her so long to get the takedown she doesn't score many points. And maybe she loses a decision because the new scoring system is supposed to score damage, it doesn't score wrestling. Unless damage is equal, wrestling doesn't get scored. So she could win a decision even though she looks like she's losing the fight. So that's something to consider. And Holm by decision is probably quite a high payout. So that's one way to look at it. I wouldn't play that personally, but it's an interesting perspective nonetheless. All right, then we go to Kattar versus Sterling. So I've seen loads of people really rag on Sterling. So Aljamain was a champ. He's obviously a fighter not many people like. He's not very popular. People love to hate on him, but I think we need to give him some respect. He was the champ for so long, and the UFC was so fed up of him being the champ. They wanted to get rid of him, and they just could not get rid of him. In the end, they forced his hand. Sean O'Malley, and look, I'm not being conspiratorial here, but they gave him the fight, and Sterling said, I don't want to fight, I'm injured. And they basically forced his hand, and he was fighting on one leg, and he obviously got finished. Now, people think that he's done. Go and look at his fights before that. He was absolutely dominating people, and some of the people he was beating, you know, he was doing to them what we've never seen other fighters do. So, I like when you saw his fights leading up to his title reign and his defences, his jiu-jitsu just looked phenomenal. The back takes, you know, I think people forget how elite he is when it comes to his jiu-jitsu, and he doesn't even need to take you down. He just finds your back by accident. And I think Kattar may make the mistake of playing in his world a little bit too long. We see this with fighters at a high level, and I think he is one of these ones who has a lot of confidence and cockiness, and I think that can catch him out. I think he may end up grappling, maybe if it's just against the cage, or maybe if they just clinch up, or even if he somehow gets a takedown. I feel like he may play there a bit too long and get reversed. I also think Aljo is going to be very big. He's a big guy, so I think he's going to be the bigger, stronger fighter, and I think he's going to be very hungry and kind of embarrassed as well. We see fighters who are at a high level after they have a loss, especially a knockout loss. Some of them come back and don't look as good, and it kind of does them in. Others come back hungrier than ever. They correct their mistakes. They learn more. And I think people are forgetting that Sterling, although he's not an elite striker, he can strike and he has got skills. And the grappling upside for him means he doesn't really have to worry about the fight going to the ground, because if it goes to the ground, he's probably going to end up winning the fight, even if he's on bottom. So I like Sterling at this point. He's at 1.58 odds, not great value to be honest, but I do think he wins the fight. I'm probably in one of the minority groups of people who thinks it's still a good bet to take at those odds. I think Sterling wins this fight the majority of the time. I think he's very good. I think he's a thorn in the UFC side. They want him to go because the fans just don't like watching him. But he's very, very, very good. And also his camp, the Ray Longo camp, they are doing some good work with their fighters at the moment. So I think he wins. I think this is potentially a good stylistic matchup for him, because after O'Malley, he is going to be working on his striking defence. He's going to be working on how to beat strikers even more. So he'll be preparing for a fight just like this, because that's where Kattar's got the advantage. And look, I do like him as a fighter. Kattar, I think he's got talent. I just don't see him as being championship material. That's just my personal opinion. I think he's very, very, very close. I'm not having a dig at him. I think he's one of the best in the world at what he does. But I don't think he's quite in that top, that top 3 realm. Whereas I think Sterling, you can make an argument to say he 100% is in there. Next fight, Prochazka against Aleksander Rakic. We've been waiting for Rakic, but so many of us MMA fans have been waiting to see him fight again. A lot of people hating on him, slagging him off, saying there's a lot of things they don't like about him. But he is an interesting guy to watch fight. He's got this very technical style, very patient. He moves backwards a lot as well and strikes very well from moving backwards, which is a very unique skill, especially at a more high weight class, like light heavyweight. Jiri obviously is a fight everyone loves to watch fight. He is just wacky, he's a crazy character, you can't not like the guy. When he fights, he puts his hands down, and it is worrying. You clench every time, you go, oh no. You think he's going to get knocked out, and then he ends up winning. He's just got this really crazy style. He's got a good chin. You have to have a good chin when you have your hands down as well. But I think it's going to get tested. I think his style could not be a very good matchup against Rakic. I think Rakic's going to use the kicks a lot. I think he's going to use body kicks a lot, actually. And with Jiri's hands low, I just have this feeling that Jiri's going to get caught on the chin. I mean, he often gets caught on the chin, but I feel like he's going to get caught on the chin expecting something coming up from the body. I don't know why. I just Watching the tape, I can just see this. And I think Rakic may end up shocking everyone and may end up finishing Jiri. I think if Jiri comes at Rakic quite aggressively after he's been off for so long, I think he has a chance of overwhelming him quickly. But if Rakic stays patient and survives that initial storm, I think he may start to take over gradually. I would love to see these two fight a 5-round fight. I think that would be a lot more of an interesting situation. I think over 3 rounds, the danger Rakic adds is he may drop around and then he may be behind and he just may not be able to win a judge's decision. Jiri has a style where he goes for the finish. I think Rakic's more patient style. I think he's going to be looking for that perfect knockout shot and trying to set it up. And it just depends if he can find it quick enough. And if he does find it, you know, Jiri's got a very good chin. He may survive getting cracked and he may even come back and do some damage himself. We've seen that happen to him. We've seen him get rocked and then come back and win the fight multiple times. So it's an interesting one. It's hard to know which sort of Rakic is going to turn up. He's actually the favourite at 1.80 odds, which I cannot believe. Jiri is at even money. I actually thought Jiri would be a massive favourite here. I thought he would be at like 1.60 just because I know so many people are high on him and are backing him and the public loves him. But here we go. I guess maybe there's some sharp line movement as well that's keeping Rakic there. But there has been a narrative for a long time that Rakic in that division, in the light heavyweight division, is the perfect style to beat Jiri. Not everyone's saying that, but I've heard a few people say that and analyse it. And I kind of agree to a certain extent because Jiri comes forward quite aggressively with his hands down and Rakic is very good at moving back and countering. So I can absolutely see him catching him with some mad, like a head kick or some, you know, a very hard body kick. I can, for some reason, what I see is a body kick, and then when Jiri's hands are low, just a punch that doesn't seem very hard. You know, when you throw like a lead body kick and then you just put a right hand behind it, I can see something like that clipping him, and then that being the beginning of the end. I don't know why. I can also see Jiri just marching over there and just smashing Rakic to pieces if he's not prepared. We'll see what happens. It's one of those fights that I would just say, enjoy the fight and just avoid betting on it, or just put a little bit on for fun for either of them to win by finish. Now that I've said that, it's probably going to go the distance. You may get some good odds for that, but I think these are two fighters looking to make a statement. Rakic wants to make up for lost time. Jiri wants to get back in contention. So that should spell fireworks. So maybe fight does not go the distance. Is an interesting play. I'm not sure what the odds are, but check it out. And then insanely, we've got former champ Jiri fighting underneath prospect Bo Nickal, who's fighting Cody Brundage. See, this fight is kind of crazy, and you can kind of see what the UFC are doing. They've got the veterans from the UFC, former champions, some people who are still right at the top of their game, but who are former champions as well, being put before the new prospects. The UFC must be very, very high on Bo Nickal. They must think that he is going to be a champ. And he's got the skill set to do it. He's an elite wrestler, and we've seen wrestling being one of the most overpowered skill sets to have. But can he put it together, is the question. And look, we're watching him chew his way through a load of prospects. The UFC want to build him up. So he's getting that boxing storyline where they're giving him just small increases in competition. I've seen other fighters, just like him, basically be fed to the wolves. They get a few fights in the UFC and then they just get thrown to some of the elites who just absolutely batter them. He's not getting that treatment. He's getting a very nice progress where, you know, they're progressing him nicely where they're spoon feeding him easier competition. So Bo Nickal is 1.05 odds. Insane odds. Nobody should be that big a favourite in MMA unless you've got like an amateur fighting a pro. I'm not saying that Brundage has a chance, really. I don't think he's going to win. But at 11.00 odds, if you're going to bet on one of them, you're going to bet on Brundage. Or you're going to bet on the over. You know, I do think that Bo Nickal is going to try and get a finish in the first round and make a statement. But I can envisage him being a bit more patient because it's a big stage, it's a big event. He may take his time because I think he knows he's got the skill set to win. So he just needs to not make any mistakes. So he may feel it out. And I feel like he may be close to finishing the fight in the first round. And maybe he even locks in a rear naked choke or something. But Brundage just manages to survive to the bell. And then the second round comes and it gets over quite quickly, but maybe it will go over that 1.5 rounds. I can also see Bo Nickal just coming out and just trying to finish him straight away. But you get this situation where people are so afraid of his wrestling, they're not willing to get the rest of their game going. You know, they're almost paralysed by fear. Brundage's best chance is just to go over there and just go for it and start throwing, because Bo should be enough of an experienced martial artist now, mixed martial artist, to know that he shouldn't shoot a takedown straight away. So he may come out and try and throw a jab, you know, throw some leg kicks, just to say, look, I'm going to strike with you before going for the takedown. So that's the small window of opportunity any fighter who fights him has. Because if he shoots straight away, they may stuff the takedown because it's too obvious. So he's always going to try and set it up because he's a professional. He's not going to just shoot in and double leg immediately unless he has no respect for his opponent's wrestling defence. And in the UFC, you kind of have to have respect for everyone, because everyone, I mean, within reason, but everyone who fights from now on are going to be, at the very least, a fairly good fighter. So if I were Brundage, I'd go straight over and I would just try and bomb on Bo Nickal. We've seen this before with, we saw this with Brock Lesnar. He became a champion. What he did was incredible in such a few fights. And I was never high on Brock Lesnar. I wanted him to fail because I didn't want a WWE superstar to come in and win the title. But I have to give, I had to, take my medicine and admit he did a fantastic job. And he was just a very athletic, powerful wrestler like Bo Nickal. But when he fought Alistair Overeem, we heard rumours in his camp that he didn't like being hit. He didn't like to spar. And fair enough, he's not been a fighter, he's not been a boxer or a kickboxer, he's not developed that defence or got used to getting hit. Fighters were told to go easy on him. I'm not saying Bo's going to be like that, but he's probably not used to actually getting into wars like some mixed martial artists are. So what Overeem did was blast very hard body kicks, and obviously Overeem's a heavyweight and he's an elite Dutch kickboxer, very good striking pedigree, so he was always going to outclass Brock. Also a very big guy who can defend a takedown. But what he did was, he used violence to overwhelm Brock. The body kicks were so hard, you could just see the panic in his face, because he'd never been hit like that before. Not in any of his fights, not in any of his sparring, and it was just a shock. He was just busting leg kicks, boxing was good, but the body kicks were just absolutely savage. Brundage's one opportunity is to try and get that same reaction from Bo by moving forward to it very quickly and landing something hard, and that's going to take an element of luck because Bo is very athletic, he's got very good striking defence, but he's not been doing this long enough to 100% be able to avoid it. So you can't bet Bo at those odds, it's absolutely mad. You might want to take him to win in round one, but I think Brundage to win by finish is a massive plus EV bet, even though the chances of it cashing are very, very, very low, just because it's going to be like 25 to 1 or something like that. Because there is a world that Bo either gasses from wrestling and can't put him out, or just gets clipped in an exchange. So the play to go, it would be to Bo to win, and probably under 1.5 rounds. You probably won't get very good odds for that, or Bo to win in round 1 or round 2. But the line value is probably in the over, or it's in Brundage. But just realise that's a lotto ticket. It's a huge long shot. Someone is going to beat Bo at some point. They're going to crack him, and you're going to be like, oh wow, okay, he is mortal. That is probably going to happen when he gets up to the elite of the division. It's probably not going to be Brundage, but Brundage could get lucky. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, that's done. We know what's going to happen in that fight. Cody's going to absolutely maul him. What I'm saying is there's just a sliver of chance that more, and this would be more about Bo making a mistake, by the way, than Cody being good. Bo has a limited amount of experience, so he could make a mistake and just walk into something, just bad timing and just luck on Brundage's part for throwing the right strike at the right time. That's what I'm saying. But let's move on anyway. We've got Charles Oliveira next against Armen Tsarukyan. Interesting fight. Obviously everyone loves Charles, we all love him, amazing style, very heavy hands. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, but his hands are very heavy. He actually gets the fight to the ground, often by knocking people down, but he also does have some wrestling as well. He is actually a very powerful grappler as well. So he's got a lot of good tools, and he's got the striking upside here. Tsarukyan is a wrestler, he's a very good mixed martial arts wrestler. Charles can absolutely beat him. I think Charles can submit and knock out anyone in his division. Anybody. He has that capability. Tsarukyan has got a very good skill set in a 3-round fight to nullify Oliveira though. Well, I think what we'll see is, we'll see Tsarukyan grappling and, to be honest, kind of stalling. I think he's going to grapple Charles. I think it's going to be a frustrating fight to watch. He's going to take him down, hold him. I think there'll be a lot of stalemate positions. Charles's path to victory is by landing heavy strikes and rocking him, or just outpointing him with damage and staying safe when it does get to grappling range. If I had to put my money on someone, just because Charles is at 2.75 odds, I probably would side with him. And Tsarukyan's at 1.47. If it was a little bit different, if Tsarukyan was like 1.65, I might look at him. But I think at those odds, I think Charles as well. Charles has got to know that this is do or die. This fight is essential for him to get back on track and become a champion again. Tsarukyan obviously super motivated as well. But I think this is the most motivated we're going to see Charles again in his career. If he loses from here, he may never become a champ again. So I think for the odds, he's got the value. But if I had to pick, I would say Tsarukyan wins a boring decision. Charles gets frustrated and just cannot get his game going. I hope Charles wins by finish though, because that would be the fight we want. We want to see what happens when he doesn't get taken down and he stays on his feet. And if Charles has got that sort of defence and has been improving in that area, he's going to be a very difficult fighter to deal with. I just feel like Tsarukyan is just going to be too successful on just chaining those takedowns together and being relentless. If I was going to play it though, I'd play Oliveira, even though I think he probably doesn't get it. I think it's going to be a close fight though. Next, I've been talking about this fight for a long time. Justin Gaethje fighting Max Holloway. Justin Gaethje is 1.61 odds, Max Holloway is at 237, but he was a much bigger underdog. I think he was at 250 or 275 at one point. Guys, I get it. Justin Gaethje, yeah, he's got a nice highlight reel. He's got lots of knockouts. He's a lethal striker. Everyone knows that about him. But I feel like the reason everyone's backed him to being such a favourite is because of that. But if you look at who he's beaten, who's he really knocked out? He knocked out Poirier with a head kick. Okay, fair enough. And that was slick, not going to lie. But Poirier is kind of at the end of his career. You look at all his other finishes, there's not really any names that stand out as you go, oh wow, that was impressive. I mean, there's people like Tony Ferguson back there. And like, you know, I love Tony. He's one of my favourite fighters of all time. Just such an entertaining guy. But that's not really a feather in your cap, knocking him out. Okay, it kind of is actually, but what I mean is, you know, he's not the most top tier elite fighter. Max Holloway is absolutely an elite fighter. He's the definition of the word elite. He's one of the most successful champions of all time. He's only lost to one person in, I think, 10 years, maybe even 13 years. And that is Alexander Volkanovski. And Volkanovski is one of the best fighters in mixed martial arts history. I know at the moment he's going on this decline where he's had 2 bad fights, but look, he came back too soon after a knockout and got knocked out again. Like, that's really what really did it for him. Before that, you look at his skill set, look at who he's beaten, he's one of the best. Look at what he did with Islam coming up in weight class in their first fight. That's the only guy to beat Max, and he did have power advantage in their fight. So I get the comparisons to Gaethje, but people forget how good Max is. Gaethje is not on Volkanovski's level. I'm sorry, like Gaethje has got a lot of great attributes with his boxing and kickboxing, but he is not a Volkanovski. I think if this was a 3-round fight, Gaethje would be more of a favourite. Max is coming up in weight. I think Max is gonna have the cardio advantage. He's gonna be the volume striker against the power puncher, and Max, in his career, has done well against people who are powerful. He's got a very good chin, and he can weather the storm and come back and stick it on you. And I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I don't understand why the odds are as wide as they are. It should be so much closer, in my opinion. I think with Max, a lot of people are looking at what happened with his fights with Volk and seeing Volk's power, but you've got to remember, Volk is just someone who is, he really is like a freak athlete. I think if Volk fought Gaethje, my money would be on Volk all day long, assuming he's healthy and not been knocked out and everything else. I don't think Gaethje really is at that level of the top 2 or 3 in the world. Max absolutely is, in my opinion. There's a bit of an element of how he performed moving up in weight, but I think he's going to be more powerful. He's going to have the cardio advantage still. He's got a big frame as well. I think as long as he gets out of the first round and a half, 2 rounds, I think he's going to start taking over the fight and dominating. And I think his style was actually quite good to counter Gaethje. I think Gaethje is going to land on him, and there's going to be moments where it's going to look dicey, but I think Max is going to come back and just use volume to the body, to the head, and I think he's going to be styling on him a little bit towards the end of the fight because his cardio is just so elite. And a good thing as well about Max, compare this with Bobby Green, like I was saying earlier, he's looked after himself, his body, his health. You see his chin has held up all through his career. He's been fighting a long time, he's taken a lot of punches. And the guy just never seems to get knocked out or dropped. I don't think he's been finished in over a decade. Maybe even longer, maybe 13 years. I may be getting that wrong, but he hasn't been finished in a very long time. He's taken Volkanovski to a decision 3 times. So in a 5-round fight, I just can't back Gaethje, especially when I locked in Max at 2.75, I believe. I think he's just too elite. I think people are sleeping on him because Gaethje's name has been more hyped up in the UFC more recently. I think people have just forgotten about Max's body of work and how good he is. And part of that is because he just doesn't take any fight he gets. He picks his fights, he lets himself recover and heal, and that's why his chin is so good. I think he's going to shock everyone on Saturday, and I think this is a must bet. If you're watching the UFC, I would say you need to bet Max Holloway. Moving forward, we've got Weili versus Zhang, China versus China. Interesting fight. Zhang is one of these fighters. Sorry, I said Weili then. I don't know why I said that. Zhang is one of these fighters who has a fantastic skill set and is really that next generation of women's fighter. She's just good everywhere. A very, very competent professional, very competent athlete. Just very good striking, very good grappling, good wrestling as well. Very well rounded. Yan, very good hands. I think that's where she's got the advantage, and I think she's going to have an advantage when it comes to the volume. This is going to be a fight where I think if Zhang mixes in the takedowns, I think she's going to pull away, and it's not going to look very close. I think she may get this fight to the ground and may land some ground and pound, and it'll be quite savage. But if Yan can keep it standing, I think she can take over the fight as the fight goes on. I think Zhang is very dangerous at the start of the fight, and she's got good cardio, she's got good everything. But I think Yan will make it more even as the fight goes on. I think at 4.50 odds for Yan to win and 1.22 odds for Zhang, obviously there's not much value in 1.22 odds. So I think if you're going to play one side or the other, Yan is where the value is. I don't know if I'd be comfortable playing that though, just because of how good Zhang is. So, yeah, I mean, I would probably take Yan as a very small, long shot play, just because of the odds. I think it should be closer to like 1.40 and like maybe like 3.8 or something like that. So I think the odds are a bit wide, but not a huge amount wide. And obviously it's women's MMA. We've seen some weird scoring with women's MMA as well. So maybe there is a world where we could see a decision being a bit of an upset. But one of these fights, to be honest, I can see this fight playing out in a load of different ways. So it's not my most confident prediction at all. But if I was going to pick it, I'd go Yan based purely on the line value. I think Zhang wins, but I think Yan is where the value is. Then we come up to the main event. So Alex Pereira against Jamhal Hill. Now look, full disclosure, when I first saw this fight announced, I was Team Pereira. I thought Hill was going to be in trouble. I thought there's going to be a big striking disparity, and Pereira was going to get it back. And then I started doing the tape study and looking into the fight a bit more, and I just feel like Pereira is actually on a decline. I know he's not been in the UFC for very long, but he's been kickboxing for years. And he's fairly new to MMA. I think there was this mythos around him, which was shattered when he got knocked out. And subsequently, I think it's taken a bit out of his confidence as well. He still fights very well and very confident. He is in his element striking. But I think Hill, to be honest, Hill's just such a big guy. He's a big guy, he's very athletic. He's also younger as well and learning and getting better. I think if he comes in with the right game plan, he's going to absolutely run away with this fight, especially in the later rounds. He needs to survive the first round or two, and I think the way he's going to do that is going to be grappling with Pereira. I think he's going to push him up against the cage. I think he's going to maybe try and drag him down and just maybe not even sit on top of him. I think he may just make Pereira get up just to drain him from energy. I think Hill's going to be the bigger fighter in there as well. I know Pereira is very big, but Hill, we see him cage side at every UFC event, and the guy looks big. He looks huge for the weight class. He looks like a heavyweight. I think his biggest weapon is going to be like I think he's going to move forward mixing the grappling, which is going to kind of set it up. I think the straight punches are going to be big weapons for him. I think he's going to keep it very simple. I think he may also have some trouble with Pereira's leg kick, so I think he's going to try and close the distance and stifle him. But I just see him winning by grinding out Pereira to the point where Pereira's fatigued, and then I think he'll finish him later on in the fight. Pereira, I love watching him. I think he's got a very exciting style, but we've seen how he fatigues and gets tired, and I don't think Hill's going to get tired like that. I think Hill's just going to keep going and be the better athlete, so he just needs to survive that initial 2 rounds. There is obviously a danger element, but I think Hill being plus money, 2.10 odds, Pereira being 1.72. I think the value's on Hill here. I think 90% of people are going to be betting Pereira, so I know I'm probably going to be in the minority here. But I just think this is one of these matchups where if we went back a couple of years ago, I would not pick Hill at all. But when I'm watching his previous fights, there's just something about me feels like Pereira has got to a point, and you know, the image of him has been shattered and people aren't afraid of him so much anymore, and they know how to beat him. I think Jan as well, that fight told us a lot about him. I think he's still got a lot to learn in MMA, but also he's towards the end of his career, whereas Hill's got this youth advantage where I think every time we see him, he's a bit better. And I think in this case, he's just going to be slightly better. And I think for the odds, I think Hill's a very good play. So that's my opinion. That's my entire card breakdown. We'll see how it goes. I only make these when I feel like I've got good reads and opinions on the fights. And this week I feel like I really do have a good understanding of how the fight's going to play out. Obviously, look, it's very difficult to predict mixed martial arts, so I could be completely wrong with my analysis. You know, I have been wrong before. I've been very right before. In some of my previous videos, I've made predictions that have had crazy accuracy. I've also made ones that have been completely wrong as well. So we'll see how things play out. I've got a good feeling about it. It's going to be an amazing card. These fights are going to be so fun. And with the bonuses being 300 grand, we're going to see some people just really going for it. So the undercard, I think we're going to see people really pushing to get a finish in particular. You've got to watch this one live, guys. There's going to be a lot of live betting opportunities, I think, as well. If I was going to watch this, I would be looking at Hill. I'm talking about live bets, by the way. I'd be looking to bet Hill after like round 1, round 2. I'd be looking to bet Max after round 1 as well, live. I probably would be looking at Jim Miller as well. I think you're going to get some crazy odds. And look, they may not all win, but you probably only need one of those to win, because the odds their odds are already plus money. They're going to inflate some crazy odds if their opponent has a good round 1. Live betting is very lucrative. If you don't do it, jump on it. I would put a very small amount, maybe like a couple of units to the side, just to experiment with live betting, because it can be very temperamental and difficult on different sports books. Personally, I like to use Unibet. Bet365 is a good one to use as well, but they restrict you like crazy, so that's why I've got to use Unibet. This weekend's going to be great, guys. Great opportunity to make money. Great opportunity to build some crazy parlays as well. I'm going to be posting what I call a monster parlay in my Telegram channel. I'm also going to break down all of the fights, put out the written description, and I also post my plays before they happen live as well. So join the Telegram group in the description if you want to get my analysis and you want to see my plays on the day. The monster parlays, I've not hit one for a couple of weeks, but I did hit 3 in a row. So I went on this streak when I first started the VIP service, but I post the monster parlay in the free group. So for the first 3 weeks, we hit one. So it was always, I think, a minimum 5 bets, 5 to 8 bets, I think they were. So we're going to get one back. We've lost the last 2 weeks in a row. I think this time is going to be the chance to hit another monster parlay. So the one I've got this week actually is a very high odd play. So I'm going to do two variations. I'm going to do one that's about 10 to 1 odds and one that's going to be about 100 to 1, which is going to be a massive long shot. So you can get all my free plays in the description. Follow along on Saturday, which is tomorrow, maybe today, depending on when this gets uploaded. I'll start posting everything. I'll post the breakdowns. I'll post who I think are the best plays. And then as the fights are about to start, I'll tell you who I'm playing, so you can follow me live. You won't get the line value, obviously. If you do want my plays and you want to lock them in ASAP, message me in my Telegram channel. My handle's Blacksmith MMA. It's in the group. If you scroll up, you'll see it. Ping me a message, VIP. Send me a message. I'll give you instant access to that for the monthly subscription, and you can lock the plays in straight away. The line value is probably still going to be good for a little while. We will start seeing movement soon though, so I'd get on it quickly if you're going to do that. If not, I would say do some research, lock your own plays in soon, because there's some underdogs here who I think are going to be, maybe even going to be the favourites come fight time. So let's get involved, let's make a load of money this weekend.